All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks for making time to join us as we discuss over the next 30 minutes or so wellness programs and how one should envision the end goals for their wellness programs. We have had an on-time start, which is really great. We've got 30 minutes, so the way we'll break it up is we'll have about 20 minutes or so of discussion with the panelists, and maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, which we will open up for questions from the attendees. So with me on the panel today, I have Nanjappa, who is Vice President, Human Resources at Infosys. And I also have Willis Langford, who is Director, Human Resource at Avnet. I am your moderator for this session. My name is Dr. Noel Coutinho, and I'm from Econ Care. Interestingly, both our panelists today, Nanjappa and Willis, have spent close to 2 decades each with their respective current organizations. And I think that's going to be a real value add for us and a great position for them to be able to share their insights on a very interesting topic that we have chosen for this session. I must tell you, this topic is not an easy one to discuss, but since we have these 2 experts with us, we'll try and make the most of it. Many organizations invest in health and wellness, among other employee benefits. However, health and wellness is probably the most difficult to define, and outcomes are probably even more difficult to comprehend. There are varying views from short-term goals to long-term outcomes, which become all the more complex when combined with maybe financial and non-health metrics. However, I believe that no one can debate the importance of having a wellness program, and probably a really good one at that. So, like starting off any good project, it's, I think, very important to plan well. And there is no better way to plan than to have a clear vision for the program and to agree upfront as to what would define the success of that particular program. Then it's probably left to working towards it by designing and implementing programs that align with the success metrics. Vision obviously gives us direction, and metrics provide milestones that one can celebrate or course correct, or probably even aim for better results and greater heights. Today, there are better tools that we have in terms of gathering insights, not just about health data, but also ancillary data points that could help in terms of gauging success or the health of an organization or an individual. Today is the day and age of AI, big data, machine learning, technology of all sorts. And, in addition to the human element, all of these can only raise the bar in terms of expectations that one could have from an organization, from an employer, from an employee, from a provider, in terms of engagement and outcomes. So today, while we go through this particular session, I would look forward to hearing from our panelists their own experiences in terms of envisioning end goals for their organizations and measuring success. One important point that I would like to share is also the fact that we will be taking questions during this session. And you could put down your questions on the chat option that's available on the board that's in front of you. So without much ado of giving this brief introduction to our session, I will now open up my questions to our panelists. And Nanjappa, if I could start with you. Question to you is, how does one actually go about creating a vision for their wellness program?
Thanks, Noel, and hi, Wills. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Well,
yes, we can, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity and spending, and for the audience for spending that Friday afternoon with us. I usually look forward to collaborative sessions like this because you always look, learn, and improve. Because Noel spoke about the fact that I spent close to 2 decades. I remember an incident where I was completing 10 years, and usually teams kind of celebrate that you spent 10 years, and we do a small party of sorts, and everybody came and congratulated me. There was one kid in the team, and she came and said, wow, 10 years, you didn't find a job for 10 years. So that's I figured that day that there are two sides of the coin and two ways to look at things. But having said that, that's not the reason why I stayed for close to 17 years, because it's because there's never been a dull moment. Coming back to the topic, it's close to our hearts, something that we've lived the experience over a couple of decades now. So it's evolved over 2 decades in my most organizations, and then the evolution has happened in 3 stages. The first stage is when organizations were in denial. They were looking at this as more cost advantage than anything else. The second phase of the evolution was really about how wellness was looked at as a productivity tool of sorts, and how this could be this meant we could bring in increased productivity. And the third phase, which is going on right now and possibly the future, is about how organizations are looking at this as a strategic imperative, which is very heartening, and how it becomes the core of organizations. Now, there are a few important points, I think, from a vision point of view. One, a wellness program has to be beautifully aligned to the employee value proposition. I think that's very, very important, because it should be the reason why people are staying in the organization. It's because people are living that experience, and maybe even why people may want to join the organization. So it has to align beautifully with the employee value proposition of the company. Second, wellness program should not be a program, but really a culture catalyst of sorts. It should integrate very well with the rest of the organization in terms of HR policies and processes, and not just be isolated. And the third thing, which is very important, is it should be defined by the experience that employees see every single day, and not once in a while. So a day in the life of an employee should be touched or peppered with the impact of wellness intent. I have a framework called AEIOU, and I believe good wellness program should have the AEIOU framework. A means essentially awareness and alliances. Awareness both from an organizational point of view and self-awareness at an individual level, and alliances because you leverage expertise to get better. E is executive sponsorship. The tone at the top is very important for something like this to work. I is innovation. Bulk of the time we focused on the execution of it, but I think it's important to have a choice of offerings and evolve the offerings. O is outcome, and organizations are grappling with this concept of measuring success, and outcomes are a very important part in the visioning exercise. And U is really user experience, because at the heart of all of this is our employees, and it's important to make sure that they see the difference. So these are some points that I thought were important from a visioning exercise point of view, and then eventually see the results of this.
Thanks, Manjapa. Thanks for that. Moving over to you, Willis. How have you gone about designing your wellness programs, and what are the things that typically would have been influences in terms of coming up with a decision?
Thank you, Noel, and thanks to everyone for having the patience. Like Nanjapa said, on a Friday afternoon, it's always a challenge to say, hey, I'm not going for a party, but what's in it for me? But we promise you there's going to be something in it for you as well, like the acronym WIIFM, there's going to be something in it for you. So yeah, back to this, I think it's very important, because when you have, in today's world, especially right now as we speak, apart from the ABC that Noel talked about, which I would call it the ABC, which is artificial intelligence, big data and cloud, and all of this modern machine learning and all of this. But there is going to be this element of human touch, which is still going to be there. And now we have to see whether it's high touch and high tech as well at the same time. The point is, yes, with a what should I say, well-being program, I look at it as a two-pronged approach. On the one side, you want to still ensure that the employee has what he wants to, which is the health and well-being, and at the same time to ensure that the management or the organization doesn't lose out its productivity and its investment. They really want a buck for the bank. So that is still going to be there. So I would say the biggest influences, from an employee perspective and a management perspective, if I were to draw both sides of the coin, I would say the first thing is I need to see that it really addresses today's combination of employees that we have, whatever the demographics that we have. So it's the 3 Gs for me. I mean, I love the A, E, I, O, U of Nanjappa, and I'm going to give you another one, the 3 Gs, which is basically you look at covering the proper gender coverage, the generational cohort, and also the geographical coverage. Because sometimes we look at wellness and saying, hey, X company is doing it, why can't we try it out? There's going to be these 3 big dimensions of the 3 Gs that can make your company differ from the other. So that's from the employee perspective, to make sure that they really got a very customized, experience of saying what's in it for me, and that is satisfied. Now, on the other hand, if I look at it from how do we really convince, and I think that is where I think Nanjappa as well touched on this, what value that we can bring upon. And that value is something that we can use to impress and influence the organization to say that, hey, this is going to be the productivity, this is going to be your retention, or there's so many other metrics that you can talk about. But what is the value that you bring to the table? And if that is going to be exhibited in as clear as possible, because today, I think, if you look at the Gallup survey and all of this coming over the last 5 years, we talk about return on value now when it comes to human capital rather than return on investment, because you can see and measure the value in a way where, like Dr. Noel talked about, which could be indirect, but at the same time measurable to a large extent. So that's the big influences for us.
Thanks so much. I mean, it looks like an alphabet class. I mean, the vowels and the 3 Gs and stuff. But I think that's a very good way of putting it very simply in terms of being focused, in terms of what we probably need to do in terms of addressing, getting to the vision, getting to the outcomes, making things interesting for everybody who's involved, and getting the results that you would look for. So I have a question for both of you, and I'm okay with either of you taking it up first. What are the top 3 things that you would track in a wellness program, and how? So what are the tools that you're using in terms of tracking, and what are the top 3 things on your mind when you say, I want to track and see whether my program is going to be successful? Willis, Nanjappa, one of you, who's going to take it first? Okay, yeah, Nanjappa, yours.
I'll give Willis a break. So my view is, I think organizations shouldn't lose sleep over this. Simply because they don't see immediate results. I think it's important to understand the short-term versus long-term metrics. I understand that organizations are trying to figure this whole thing, try and put a score around many of the measurements, and which we're very used to. But in my view, the long-term benefits of a good wellness intent and program is disproportionately good on return compared to making a short-term version. So my view is that it should not really be, they should not lose sleep while they should continue to push on the journey. Second, I would urge my HR colleagues in other organizations to put on their marketing hat and look at possibly the wellness program as a product. Work on that product, do the market survey within the organization to understand what the need is. Look at working on the product and changing to the needs of the customer. Do a product launch, do user feedback, and maybe change the versions every now and then. I think it's important to treat this like a product and then see outcomes around it, and then obviously evolve and iterate. There are some things that we look for in the organization, and I'll just give you some examples. One, for sure, would be brand recall. It's very important for us to be top of mind in the employees, with the employees, from a wellness point of view. Two, building communities. I think very, very important to build communities within the organization. That's one big goal or metric. Third would be an engagement score. We believe some of this will help us get better. Fourth, possibly could be user feedback on just the experience of what they're seeing on an everyday basis. We also track core users versus passive users. We want to see the depth of involvement of core users versus passive users becoming active users, because we don't believe that all of 200,000 would come on board just like that. So that's another metric we look at. On the side, we also look at health costs and some other insurance costs and things like that as a dashboard But these are some of the things from an overall point of view that we track and we try and continue to evolve. Like I said, this is work in progress, and this has been work in progress for many years now. And we don't believe that we should eventually getting to a score is not the goal. Really. It is about just enhancing that experience and making it meaningful for and building a culture in the long run. That's really what we're looking at. But yes, we're evolving our dashboards to try and see if we can make it more and more meaningful, simply because to get the best bang for the buck. Right? That's really how we are approaching this whole.
Thanks, Nanjapa. Amazing insights into this in terms of how do you look at this as an ongoing journey. Willis, thoughts from your side?
Yes, I think I think a lot of it was covered by Nanjapa. I just want to say that one of the things that I found, because our organization being a number sales commercial organization, the first thing that any businessman would like to look at is what is his return. And it's very, like I said in my opening statement, it's a disclaimer, so to say, that it's very difficult to get a fourth decimal accuracy on what we intend to get out of our program. But nonetheless, we have at least, I would broadly say, what I would call, physical trackers, emotional trackers, and, the factual trackers. The factual trackers could be any of the things that we talked about right from the blue collar days, which is modified now. We don't just have, absenteeism, productivity, retention, attrition, medical coverage, claims ratio comparisons, health risk assessments, year on year, which I think we have a lot of partnership in the market with all of these data these days. And the data points have increased from a factual tracker point of view. And I think that is my urge for someone to really impress upon a wellness program to be comprehensive. And if you really want to show and explain to anybody that it's going to really bring them some visible dollars in, I think this is one of the best ways to do it. And then the emotional trackers are, as always, when you do your pulse surveys, you're focusing on, the pinpointed dimension of well-being. And I can tell you one of the biggest successes that we've had always, you really pick up, because today we live in a world of ratings, of, likes, of, viewership and testimonies. So I would say one of the biggest things that we use is the employee testimonies themselves. So it's coming from that side, and that's a great buy-in as well.
Thanks, Willis. I mean, interesting points that have come up from this particular discussion, right? In terms of Nanjapa mentioning about the long-term goals, he mentioned about brand recall and user feedback. You mentioned about testimonials. And what I also got to, understand from the points that you all made is that we need to look at this as an ongoing journey. We need to look at this as something that will keep evolving, because people's needs, employee needs keep changing, and we need to be ever so awake to realizing what they need, what's going to keep them engaged, what's going to be beneficial for them. Now, both you gentlemen have spent a really good amount of time, and salutes to that, to the fact that you've spent so much time with this organization, growing yourselves and growing with the organization, helping the organization grow as people very responsible for your team. But in today's day and age, where people move out of organizations like this, I mean, it's like a couple of years and people have moved out. How do you convince your HR colleagues that, you still need to look at the long term, and the long term is going to give you the right kind of benefits? Nanjapa.
So I don't convince anyone at all. I think it's important for people to run their own journeys. I've come to believe that what matters is not years in life, but life in the years. So as long as, and for people who watch cricket, it's like a franchise thing. As long as you're in a franchise for 2-3 years, you play your best, and then you move on to another franchise, and then you play your best there. So, and if you want to stay in the same franchise, then so be it. But it's as long as you're evolving as a player, and then that's and move to the A and play your A game all the time. I think that's what matters. I think the world is moving towards that, and that is absolutely okay. And today we are in a larger ecosystem. So even with regard to wellness brands, we touch upon not just employees, families, even alumni to a large extent. So in that sense, we're still in a larger, broader community of sorts. So the impact goes much beyond just the borders of the organization. But yeah, I do give some parts of inputs so that people can use some of that to their advantage. because and that way we could shape careers and interests and choices. I think that will be the best way. So that's how we would look at it, both from wellness point of view and otherwise.
Awesome. My next question to you, and we've got about 10 minutes, so I'm just cognizant of the time as well. Where do you see yourselves on the wellness journey as an organization, and what kind of experiences do you want to share? I know you touched upon this a little bit earlier in our discussion, and you said, every organization goes through stages. How do you see yourself evolving going forward? What do you think is going to come up from future initiatives, future technology, whatever you call it, and what kind of sharing of experience can you have for people who have joined us today on this webinar? Willis?
Yeah, wonderful question, because I think you use a very apt word saying it's a journey, and I think that's key to us, because wellness as it stands, it's not something like a target that you give a sales employee and at the end of the year he's met it and he's got new targets. I think it's an ongoing journey. That's the first part. I think what we have done over the years is we have built, based on our experiences, a kind of a comprehensive wellness plan which talks about 5 dimensions. And I'll quickly share with you. We talk about the physical dimension, the financial dimension, the career dimension, the social, and the community dimension. So each of these dimensions, after our studies, we have come to find out that, just running like the conventional, I remember 20 years ago or 15 years ago, someone would cover ethnic wear on Diwali and then say, okay, that's a nice thing to do. But then I don't think those things even run or fly these days. It's just one of the many thousand things that one would want to see. So we actually have this wide coverage. When you say financial, we have the financial well-being taken care of them, because today, even we have millennials, they need direction, be it their investment, be it their career progression. So then there is some direction given to them. If it is on a career standpoint, we opened up to so many other digital platforms that they have a choice, because today's generation is about choice. You don't bring them into a classroom, you reach out to them in the way that they want to be reached out. So the career aspect is covered. The social aspect is, for example, today we have so much of emphasis on D&I, on diversity and inclusion. So I'm just saying, back in the day when you had a Women's Day or something like that, it was just a celebration of roses or something like that, but now it's gone beyond that. So you actually have to bring in the social element of what makes your employees happy as well. And then you've got the community part, which doesn't go any far apart from the government trying to tell us that, okay, you spend 2% of your profits, etc., etc. I think it's on each of us to really bring in the community angle, because what we have experienced is there's a lot of bonding that happens. And then, between various hierarchical layers in the organization, that's broken down. And that is a good outreach for future rewards in your wellness program as well. And the physical part, like all of us know, be it your stepathons, be it your BMI index, be it your weight loss programs, be it any of these programs, it also adds value, because at the end of the day, you're going to see some positivity in the team that you meet. And everyone, when they look at you, like they say, face is the index of the mind. I think there's going to be a lot of forthcoming thoughts on the employers to look at the employees covered under these 5 areas. So that's the journey, and we are kind of maturing over the years, and we hope that we can carry it on further and see the best of it.
Thanks, Willis. Nanjappa, any thoughts?
Yeah, so it's been a learning experience, almost close to 2 decades, and today, as we speak, it's possibly the #1 brand. And when we do our brand surveys internally, it's the #1 brand in the organization. Today, we don't look at it as wellness, because it is really a culture catalyst for us to propel us forward and aligns beautifully with our value prop. It is looked at as a non-monetary benefit than anything else, and it is holistic and includes, like Will said, many other things: mental health, physical health, leisure, communities, and safety, and things like that. So it is overall. There are a few things that I wanted to touch upon. One, what we're seeing success towards is possibly on personalization. I think using technology has helped us personalize the experience of employees, and we're in that journey, and it's pretty exciting. And it also means that employees take ownership of a product like this, and it's grounds up, and that's why it becomes that much more important. So the personalization aspect and the agenda is become a norm of sorts. Second is, of course, we've segmented our offerings. We have a flurry of offerings that people can pick and choose from, and segmentation is large, either based on interest or demographics or any other. And that has again made a big difference. We've tried to do some sort of analytics, which is giving us good bang for the buck. So that's the other part that we've been able to do. Alliances, I think, is another area of focus. There are experts, there are folks propping up across the world on some of these subjects, and I believe organizations should keep their eyes and ears open to leverage the expertise which is outside the organization. And that, I believe, will take us far in this whole game, and people have to co-create this whole thing. And the last one is around technology. We've tried to include this in our internal platforms, and we're seeing some good returns on using of technology and bringing people together. Overall, the intent is to make this the people's program and make this a grounds of movement. The more and more ownership that happens from people on the ground, the more success we will get, which is very different from how we started. It was a very top-down program, and today it's become I think that's what helps.
Thanks, Nanjappa. I think something that's coming out very clearly from the discussion that we are having today is that the programs are people-centric. People, whether it's like you mentioned, Willis, about gender, geography, so on, it's about being personalized. So you keep people interested in what they would prefer in terms of benefits. And very truly, like I would relate to that, because a young millennial would have a very different requirement in terms of wellness as compared to a person who's probably, getting his first shock in life with a chronic illness, to somebody who's already having, chronic illnesses to deal with and needing to buy more medicines than probably thinking of running a marathon for that matter. So very, very interesting thoughts coming out of this discussion. Also the fact that, organizations need to keep their eyes and ears open and get feelers in terms of, where and what people's interests are going to be, and how do you make it the best in terms of spending every rupee or dollar, as you may call it, in terms of health and wellness benefits. The segmented approach, again, is the same thing that we spoke about. And analytics, obviously, yes, we've been gathering a lot more information about our health and wellness programs. So analyzing data from different angles obviously gives you the best in terms of being able to come up with the right kind of offerings. So panelists, thanks so much for your insights. I'd now like to invite our participants to put forward their questions, if any. Kindly be brief so that I could then get the panelists to provide the answers based upon your questions. So if there are any questions, waiting for them to pop up on the chat. Well, I don't see any questions coming up as yet, and we're kind of running out of time as well. So, yep. Anyway, so I think Nanjappa, Willis, with your permission, I think we'll close the session. On behalf of all the panelists, the organizers, and myself, I would like to thank everyone for your time and participation. And yes, we obviously look forward to meeting you in person in Chennai next week. So until then, wishing you good health and cheer. Take care, guys. Bye. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.